Well, I'm just going to start by introducing myself. I'm Ray Beldner, and I'm the co-founder and director of the Startup Art Fair. I'm also an artist and an educator, and I've taught for about 20 years. I taught at San Francisco Art Institute, UC Santa Cruz, UC Berkeley, St. Mary's College, all over the Bay Area. I also started at the first professional practices class for artists at the Art Institute.
Here?
In San Francisco,
San
Francisco Art Institute.
awesome.
Yeah, our Art Institute's a little bit different. And I did it because I was tired of seeing students who were very promising leave school and then disappear a few years later. And I felt like there was some fundamental things that we didn't impart, information we didn't impart to our students prior to them leaving school. So I did it as a way to help artists, just like this art fair is my contribution to helping artists as well. Okay, so there you go. And then on my right, I have Danielle Smith, who has Framework SF PR firm, and she's been instrumental in working with us on the fair since the very beginning. And she runs her own space called State now in San Francisco. So she's a curator and a PR person, and knows all about PR and marketing for artists. Do you want to say anything about your background?
I mean, that's pretty good. I studied art history. I promptly got a job working in finance when I was 22. And I was making those serious big bucks from like 22 to 26 and learning how to do business. And then I felt my soul slip away from me, so I started writing art criticism at my desk of this boutique finance firm. And that made me so happy, so I quit everything and I went to Costa Rica, and then when I came back I got an internship at a contemporary art gallery, and while I was there the assistant director left and I got promoted like in 2 months, and then thus my career began that way. Yeah, and so while I was working in galleries, I was really beginning to notice that when you're putting on a show, there's so much that goes on to just mount an exhibition, to doing the work of getting it up there, that promoting it is the thing that's like the last on the checklist. And it is in a lot of ways something that comes last. But it seemed like it was a problem, and so while I was in that environment, I partnered with somebody who was a communications person. We started this PR firm, and that was basically, specialized in, with writers and gallery people who knew the language of the art world, but also knew how to make it accessible so we could talk to multiple audiences, so we could write a press release that would be taken seriously, but also be able to tell the story, to a normal person what the work is about, which is something that we should probably address here today, not alienating your audience with her speak.
Oh yeah.
So that's my story.
And then to my left, I have Eric May, who's the executive director of Arts and Culture. And I asked him to do this because I was looking for another perspective on the panel, because when I teach professional practices, I try to bring in all kinds of voices from different parts of the art world, and I thought that somebody who's an artist as well as an art administrator would have a lot to say about it. And little did I know, he actually teaches professional practices as well. So you can give me your background.
Sure. I'm Eric May. I'm a native Chicagoan. I got a BFA 20 years ago, and it was a real struggle to figure out how to navigate this idea of art as a career. And I spent many years sort of struggling in the studio, working on jobs. I guess I'm still working on jobs, but I went to work for a nonprofit originally. I was an educator with them. It was a 25-year-old nonprofit here in the city. Chicago has a really rich history in artist-run spaces and nonprofits, and I was fortunate enough to sort of have a working education in how to run a nonprofit and the ins and outs of grant writing and then on the administrative side. So I worked for Beacon Street Gallery for 5 years, and then an opportunity arose, mostly a real estate opportunity. I found this beautiful storefront on Milwaukee Avenue here in town, and it just all sort of fell into place. And I opened Roots and Culture 10 years ago this November. So we're application-based program. It's a lot of, I mean, the original sort of impetus for me to open Roots and Culture was to provide an early opportunity for artists out of the degree programs here in Chicago, because we have a very, very rich educational landscape here, and many amazing MFA and BFA programs. But there's this sort of perennial brain drain and exodus that happens once people leave school. So I thought that the city needed an incubator for early careers, and I would like to say that we've been successful in doing so. I act as it's an artist-driven program. It's not curated. The artists come to us and propose shows. We sort of put the calendar together, and I work with, we have a programming committee that's half of my board. But I also serve as sort of more of a mentor role to the artists I work with. So I'm really trying not to make decisions in terms of what the work they'll show. It's an open format for artists to launch ambitious projects and challenging practices. But I want to be there and offer any sort of support I can to the artists, whether that's advice in the studio or connecting them with writers, collectors. And then one of my side hustles is that I've taught for since I got out of grad school, 6 years. I've taught at the School of the Art Institute. I actually taught high school students for many years before that. Most recently, I've been teaching professional practices for graduates at Northern Illinois University.
Nice.
So.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a free-form conversation, and I'm sure that I've sort of also reached out to some of you to come to the panel because I think it might be something that would be helpful to you. So if you have questions or comments anywhere along the line, feel free to raise your hand and ask it. Here's my basic thing about professional practices or getting noticed as a professional artist in the art world is, Eric touched on it. We don't do enough for artists to help them understand the career that they've chosen. We educate artists very well in terms of methods and materials and the theory of art and art practice, but we don't teach them about the business of it, and we leave them to fend for themselves. Much like the way I like to say I learned about sex, I learned about the art world. I picked it all up in the street. And I don't think that either one of those is very good. It doesn't make for a good sexual partner nor a good artist. Yeah.
Too bad there's not porno for
Yeah.
There is now.
Well, talk about a side hustle. It's a side hustle. No, so I set about very early on in my teaching career, and I was a fairly young artist. I was only a few years out of graduate school, and I wanted to systematize the knowledge that I learned from different mentors and peers and working artists. And there really is unlike being a lawyer or a doctor, where you have a very clear educational path and then a career path in terms of doing internships or residencies or whatever, there isn't an apparent one for artists. It's a very individual path to get to where you want to go, but there is clear pathways to that if you can figure out what you want. And the biggest problem, I think, is that artists they have a very antiquated idea of what being a practicing artist is, or I should say they have a very limited idea. Like a lot of artists, for them the paradigm is, I get out of school, I get a master's degree, I get a gallery, I get a teaching job, and then I'm in the Whitney Biennial. And that just doesn't happen for anyone really, but there's this perception that that's exactly what you do. And then when I question artists like, why do you want to teach? They don't even really know. It's not like something they want to do, it's something they think they should do. Why do you want to be in a gallery? They don't know. It's something they think they should do. So my job has always been to sort of like get artists to understand that the art world is a very broad place that has many different paths and many different ways to get there, and you have to figure that out first. Then look for the resources and tools you need to get there. And the biggest tools, getting back to the issue of this panel discussion, is really finding creative ways to get your work out there and to be seen as an artist. So that's the thing I've been working on for many years with young artists.
I think we're missing the elephant in the room. And this is something I've actually thought quite a bit about. I teach for Creative Capital and also teach at SAIC, Professional Practices. And it's a cultural thing. Artists are to be kept barefoot and pregnant. We're supposed to be kept ignorant of commerce.
Right.
We're not to be sullied by talking about money or even acting like we're on the plane of thinking about material things. And I set about studying this a while ago. There's this great book called Why Are Artists Poor by Hans Abbe.
It's wonderful.
It's a wonderful
Hans
book,
Abbe,
and so
yeah.
it really gets down into the mythology. And Olaf Valthius also writes very well in this, and Isabel Grau.
I use both those books in my class, actually.
Great, I'm glad. And so,
Yeah.
in fact, for my Project Space Corner, I have a space in storefront we're going to be having an art and values conference in the fall. Several artist-run spaces are going to be getting together talking about this whole conundrum of artists not being, if we're seen to be interested in art, it's a catch-20, I mean in money, it's a catch-22, then we're considered like money grubbing or opportunistic or not serious artist.
Yeah.
And so how do you address that catch-22 when you're talking to your classes?
My very
We have
first...
a very specific case study with startups.
Yeah.
First pushback with.
Yeah, well, exactly.
talk
And
about that.
let me just say one thing about Hans Abbe. The very first class that I teach in professional practices, I put his 25 myths of artists, like what keeps artists from being successful. He has a list of 25 ideas that artists always say, like, art is apart from commerce. Great art is, the inspiration of the artist. The artist is a genius, who is apart from the rest of society. All these mythologies that you read about or see about, or even, and if you really look at them, some of them I go, yeah, but I think that's true, actually. It's like, I even buy into a lot of them. There are these myths we all buy into through popular culture or whatever, through osmosis, that we have to shed ourselves from so that we don't remain poor, because it does actually ghettoize artists to, if you
infantilizes them,
infantilizes them
and
as
it's a kind
well,
of
yeah.
brainwashing.
Right, it is.
I want to push back on this a little bit. I think, I'm like a cusp Gen X millennial. I was born in '78, so I'm like right there. And working with younger artists today, I'm finding that there's almost an over-professionalization happening. I think that the myths that we're talking about is very much what I grew up with. Like,
You're saying they're going away.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, actually, because when I do talk about that in my class, a lot of the young artists say, yeah, I don't really buy a lot of that. But it does still persist, but it may actually persist in an older generation.
The way I understood what the career path I was choosing was going to be, I was going to be cloistered away in a studio, and I was going to find this magical art dealer that was going to represent me, and I was going to keep chugging away and making these like genius objects on my own. And the artists now, and it's entirely the technology, I think, but millennial artists are intensely like PR marketing savvy, and they also have these aspirations to be as big and as famous as they possibly can, but I think they're taking it in their own hands, and they have more agency to promote themselves. And I think that in some ways, some of the older artists I know, especially educators, are bemoaning the sort of loss of serious studio practice, because artists are spending so much time promoting themselves, that they're not anymore learning craft and really investing in making.
Yeah.
This is just a sort of a counter.
Yeah.
No, I'm not seeing that. I just say I just graduated, I just got my MFA from there, and we
Sure.
had, they're like mandatory professional practices classes now, and the two we had were just jokes as far as professional practices go.
I never got any of that in school.
Well, you wouldn't now if
Yeah.
you were going to say
Sure.
unless maybe in your
I I'm probably one of the few that's a self-taught artist, so I never went to school, art school. It was just something that I always did because I liked art and I wanted to do it. So could it be that because I didn't go to school, that I don't know about these myths?
You don't subscribe to those same mythologies about the artist.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of.
Yeah.
I think you get indoctrinated in art
You
school.
do.
Is that? I mean, because I
No,
feel
it's true.
like
I mean, Danielle actually mentioned it a little bit earlier about the pushback we got for startup. Like the idea of startup was really threatening to a lot of artists who have gone through the system, with the art school system, and they felt like, well, why are you doing that? Artists shouldn't have to pay to exhibit their work. They shouldn't have to, you know, somebody should be coming to them and funding them. You know, it's like as if
the patron.
right,
kind of-
exactly. As if artists haven't always had to do for themselves and pay their own way.
Right.
There's this mythology that the artists are the great geniuses that should be, you know, bowed down to and given grants to without any work on their own behalf. I got it when I was teaching professional practices at the Art Institute, albeit I started it in 1994, and then I got shit tons of pushback from other teachers at the school saying, we don't need this, why do we need this? I'm like, well, when's the last time you talked to your star student about what he's doing? You know, where are they now? It's like, you know, it's like a VH1 program. Where are they now? Oh, they're baristas. That's why we need it. But I do think, I actually agree with Eric to some degree. It is changing because the last time I taught professional practices, 2012, because I stopped teaching altogether when I started this program or this show. I always ask my students to give me their, you know, 6-month, 1-year, 5-year, and 10-year goals. Like, let's look at your goals. What's your big 10-year goal? And let's work backwards. Like, how do we achieve that? Well, I was shocked when about a handful of them said, my goal is to be a brand.
Exactly.
I was like, what? Where the fuck? Where did that come from? A brand.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe today is about finding the middle ground.
right, we're going from extreme marketing, not making really good art, to like, you know, forgetting the whole thing.
It's interesting though, because I'm not an artist. I'm married to Larry Roberts, 411. So we've been together since, I don't know, 20-some, almost 30 years. And so I've seen him from the beginning. He's self-taught. He was accepted into Kendall College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He went for the first week and then dropped out because he said, I can't go and be conformed.
Yeah.
He didn't like that. He was too much of an experimental artist at that point already. So he's always been self-taught and he's very experimental. His issue is he spends too much time in the studio.
Right.
He won't go out. He's in the studio morning, noon, night. He's constantly in there. So he will not promote himself. He doesn't know anything about it. He's on the complete opposite end. And so if he didn't have me, he would be in nothing. But he wouldn't even sell his work for a long time because he was like, I can't get rid of it. It was like tearing out his heart when he got rid of it.
I've met a lot of, I've seen a lot of situations with artists whose partners are kind of the driving force.
Yep.
And luckily for them, they have, you know, a partner that's willing to do the dirty work. Or,
Right.
For instance, like Ray said, I have a project space in San Francisco, and this guy came because my brother-in-law told him while he was getting his shoes shined, and he had this idea without really looking at our website or looking at the show and thinking about the kind of work that we're showing, that he would be a fit. And so he came out, and he has 2 kids. He hired a babysitter. He brought his wife, you know, and she had the bag with the book of his paintings, and you could tell that she was chatting me up, kind of. It was like this package deal, this charming couple, and I mean, I think that is. I mean, you probably know about that, you know, having to kind of be the mouthpiece.
Yes.
And I think I mean, I was a little bit taken aback by it because I've heard about that dynamic, but I hadn't been approached by it so seriously before, and it's just an interesting thing. I think like today we can kind of talk about how not to overmarket yourself because you don't want to. I mean, art is a spiritual practice. It's not.
Can be.
Right. And well, I think many people are attracted to it because it exists outside in some sense of, you know, the discussion of culture that is so bound to capitalism, and that's what we are drawn to about it. And I lost my train of thought.
And yet it's well, it's bound to that, but yet it is it's a part of it. I mean, it's apart from it in the art practice, but it's part of it in terms of the culture.
Is that your big?
Because it is still a business.
Sorry, we're just coming to say hello.
Would this be a good time to get more white wine?
Sure, if you want to get up, please do.
I'm just curious when we actually get to talking the subject of how do you go about getting your work out there and the actual how-to and how does the media play into it and what's good and what's bad.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's.
Thank you.
Because I think that what I'm talking about is the human part is really important.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think thinking about who your audience is probably the most important part. I get so many I get so many random emails from artists who clearly haven't looked at the kind of work that we're showing, and it's a boiler template, just like, hi, dear blah, here's my work. I am trying to make a network. You have to look somebody
Let's
in the
back
eye.
up just 1 second. Let's back up a second, and it gets to the idea of the goals. Do you want to show in a gallery? Before you even approach a gallery and you research it and you find the appropriate one and not just a shotgun approach, what do you want? Right? And that's the really key thing. What's your goal? What is your 1-year, 5-year, 10-year plan? Is it to have a bunch of commercial galleries that represent you and sell your work? Is it to show in nonprofits? A lot of artists who want to be in galleries, their work isn't even appropriate to galleries, and they don't even know that because they only have one idea of being an artist, which is to be in a gallery. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who's shown in some major galleries in New York and LA and San Francisco, that's not always the answer, right? It depends on what you do and where your work fits in this very giant art world. And one of the things I love about Chicago is that there is everything here, from museums to nonprofit art organizations, to commercial galleries, to artist-run spaces, to collectives. And the artists, you know, who can't get into them or don't want to get into the bigger entities do for themselves. So you have to figure out first what you want. And is your work appropriate? Then you have to do a lot of research. Well, where do I want to show? Is it in a commercial gallery? And what region is it? And who is the best representative for me?
I mean, I think what most artists want is they want an audience for their work.
Yeah.
And I think most artists feel like how I get an audience for my work is that I show in a gallery.
Right.
But it's true that just because you have a show in a gallery, I think a lot of artists, you know, like they finally get that gallery show, then they don't sell any work or it doesn't go the way they want. And just that one show or just being represented doesn't necessarily, it's not going to be the thing. There's no one thing. There's no cure that's going to fix anything. You just have to put yourself on this trajectory and know in your mind that it's an upward climb the whole
Well, I
time.
think your point about sort of interpersonal contact is super important, regardless of whatever niche in the art world that you decide to pursue. I think that, like, my scrappy nonprofit, like, much more likely to give a show to somebody who I recognize, who comes to the shows, understands our programming, introduces themselves to me, asks me for a studio visit. Like, you know, that happens a lot, but if I get a random email from a name I don't recognize, I'm less likely to, you know, remember to write them back, which is unprofessional of me. But I do think that, like, and I think the same is true for commercial spaces, and I think that's the most key, perhaps the most key part of, you know, getting your work recognized is to
Build personal relationships.
Right.
Well, the other
Right.
thing, too is with the gallery is, you're in a show. Larry has a show in a gallery, sells. But then he doesn't have a show again for another 18
Yeah.
months or
Right.
2 years in the
Yeah.
gallery. And in the meantime, they're moving on to the other artist shows.
That's right.
So they're not focusing on your art. So you may have had a couple of sales, but then you're not going to have sales probably from that gallery again for another 2 years.
Yeah.
Because you're focusing on each artist to give them each that time.
Find a gallery that does art fairs and keeps your work like
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
fresh online present.
It's in the same line, my experience. I've been
Yeah.
doing art for a while, and when I first started, I was in a couple galleries, and it was great. But then when my own personal life changed, and I wanted to stay home with my kids, and I had a change of goals for a period of time. So I still had studio time because I needed it, but I no longer pursued it as a career for a while. Now I'm trying to get back into it. The gallery that I've been with have closed their doors, so they're not even around, and they never even gave me names and information about people who have collected my art. So it's like I really feel like I'm like square one, even though I've been doing it for a long time. So, and then everything has changed all of a sudden. Like my son's telling me I have to get on Instagram. I'm like, okay.
Yes, it's a good idea.
She's
Yes.
on Instagram.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
on Instagram. I'm from my son.
Did you know that? Did you
No.
know you were on Instagram?
But it's like.
Well, it's like I always say, is that it doesn't matter if you have a commercial gallery or not, you still have to do for yourself.
Yeah.
You still have to have your own email, you
And
still have
that
to do your own
2-year
PR
gap
marketing.
is a really good
Yeah.
point.
So I'm curious to like I'm trying out this art fair stuff
Yeah.
this year. I'm startup. This is my first one.
Yeah.
So far so good.
Thank you.
And also applied. There's one in New York also that I'm doing. So. Because I did the nonprofit too. I was the executive director. I did the galleries. So I feel like, where am I going now? It's hard to have a goal when I don't really know what the goal should be.
Well, it's like
you know?
a lot, well, I mean, having taught college for many years and have been the advisor for many young kids, a lot of 18-year-olds would come to me and say, I don't know what I want to study. It's hard to know what you want. Even people of our age don't know what we want. But you do have to know it in order to get to where you're going. My professional practice class, by the way, was titled Getting There From Here. So where there is really the key.
Yeah.
Figure out where there is, you can find a way.
Yeah.
And it may not be commercial galleries for you, who knows?
I have even though I've been a full-time artist and supporting myself for a long time now, I don't sell through galleries, I only sell through art consultants. And but I have this like burning thing that probably says more about me than it says about the whole system, is that I feel like it gives more value to my work if it's, I don't mean monetary value. I mean like credibility, critical credibility if I show in a gallery. I given up a long time ago. I mean, I don't know how artists can make a living from the gallery. It's like you're lucky enough to get a one-person show, you work 18 months making all that work, and then maybe if you have a really successful show, you sell 2 or 3 pieces. So I don't think it's viable financially, but I do think that it has some worth credibly, critical credibility. But I wanted to ask you guys, are we in a time where we don't really need galleries anymore? So much?
You're talking to the guy who believes that right here. I mean,
Well, and
that's
this
why
is
I
ground
did
zero
this
for
fair.
that.
That's what this is
Exactly.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also roots and culture, that model. And I'm thinking maybe I'm just like clinging on to some old idea of what success is. Success is being in a gallery,
You know what? You have to let go of the old ideas of what success is and do what you think is right for your work. And let's just face it, galleries are going away. And they've been supplanted by art fairs and by the internet.
Yeah.
And they're never going to completely go away. And it'd be great, and it's great, obviously, to have a brick and mortar show. But it doesn't have to be in a gallery. It could be in a pizza parlor. It could be in a nonprofit. It could be in your home. I mean, one of the things that gives me an incredible amount of hope for the art world is coming to Chicago and seeing all these weird, funky artist spaces on people's lawn,
Yeah.
in their backyard, in their closet, you
I have
know.
one in my storefront.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like art is wherever, I always say art is where you find it. And it doesn't mean you're going to make a living off of it, but no one place will make a complete living anyway. You have to be fairly diversified as an artist to make a living as an artist.
I think, okay, I'm gonna push back
Okay.
a little bit.
All right. Everyone's pushing back on me.
Because I hear what you're saying. What I hear from what you're saying is that you would like somebody to critically engage with your work, and it seems like a white cube space is the best way to have that happen.
Yes.
So generally, the people that are running those spaces are the ones who go and have a show in the pizza parlor. It's really hard to get.
And it's
Just
not
do
just
your own
about
marketing.
selling.
Waxman
It's
is
about
that
the
the Chicago
conversation.
Yeah.
like art critic
Right.
here. What it's really
Yeah.
hard to convince her to come to the pizza parlor.
She
It's a-
likes going to restaurants.
Okay. Maybe in Chicago.
She actually had an article.
The deep dish pizza gets the art critics here. But what I am hearing is like that
Mhm.
still that
Yeah.
you want your work to have an audience. You want your
Be
work to
critically
become a
evaluated.
part
Yeah.
of the canon.
Yeah.
Or not even the canon, the conversation.
The
I gave up on the
conversation.
canon a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Okay, well, I'm using canon a little
Okay.
loosely. Like the internet is the
Losing
canon
your
now.
The loose cannon, that's
It's a loose cannon, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Definitely.
going
I love
with
that.
that, with thinking of the gallery, we got an email from a gallery in New York that they're a collective. They saw Larry's work here and they want him to join this 30-person collective.
Mhm.
But then you pay a monthly fee.
Yeah.
And you have to
That was my
respond
next
within a week. Okay.
question.
From which collective?
I forgot what
Mine didn't say within a week. Mine was just,
Is it Axis?
no. But my question is, how do you feel about the collective? As far as they say they'll, they keep 4 to 5 pieces on hand at all times. You get 2 group shows and 1 solo show within a 2-year contract. I mean, where is this going?
So
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
would do,
No, it's not exclusive. It's exclusive in New York.
so what I would do if I were you and
Yeah.
you're considering that sort of situation, the best research I think you could do is like Google them
Right.
and look and see.
See their artists.
Yeah, I did that.
And
Yeah.
well, okay, so is anybody like of note coming and writing about the shows that they're putting up?
I did not see
I
anything
mean, that's
that
a
was
really
negative.
good way ever of evaluating like
Right.
what's going on with a space or a gallery is are people writing about it?
Right.
Because if they're not, then generally, I mean, that's kind of a good indicator that, you might not be seeking the critical
Okay.
engagement that you want
Right.
by shipping your work out
Right.
and mounting a show to a weird place that's taking fees.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about relationships earlier.
Yeah.
So, whenever I'm researching a gallery, if I'm interested in it or they're interested in me, I look at who shows there.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then I reach out to some of those artists. The best way to get into a gallery or any kind of a space is through the people that are already there. Creating a relationship, not only with the director or the gallery owner, but the artists that are there. I've helped many artists get into my galleries because they were friends of mine that believed in their work, and I would tell my dealer, you gotta look at this person's work. That's 90% of the way dealers find other artists' work, is through other artists or collectors. So, but vetting a space is really
Right.
important. And I would vet it through the artists that show there, because I trust the artists, speak their language and vice versa. So that's what I would recommend in that case.
I'd like to talk trash on galleries.
Okay, do it.
My wife shows commercially, and she is also a full-time teacher. And
Right,
that's,
name names, where does she show?
I don't want to get into that.
We're gonna
Who's
talk
your wife?
about-
Can you name her name?
My wife's name's Jessica Labatt. She's a photographer. She's had a kind of rough time in New York. She's worked with a couple spaces. One folded, the other got a little dicey. But I don't think that galleries. I think galleries are harder to sort of keep afloat these days. I think because in Chicago we had, this new gallery district arose in the late '90s in the West Loop. Now all the galleries are getting priced out. And I think it's become more expensive to run a brick and mortar gallery. But I think that, and I think that all the sales are happening at the fairs and online. So I think that the brick and mortar business is kind kind of wobbling, and galleries are offering their artists a lot less of the services that they used to provide. Like, they don't necessarily have space to keep an inventory. They don't have space. They don't have a back room to like keep works hung and available. And they, you know, have big rosters, so they're rotating the shows, and there's this 18 months, 2-year lag time. You know, they if they can afford it, they go to fairs, but fairs are crazy expensive. And I mean, and if you look at New York, you know, there was this great boom of like younger, emerging, mid-level blue chip spaces in the mid-2000s into this decade, but they're all gone. It's like really only the biggest galleries that are surviving anymore. But I think that artists should kind of like push back on this, because 50% is a lot of the money that you're selling your work for. Like, if a gallery isn't advocating for you and finding new opportunities for you and selling your work in between shows and taking it to art fairs, like, you know, to give them half of your profit for one show every 18 months to 2 years, to me seems kind of crazy.
I think it's totally worth it. I do. Galleries really put their butts on the line, and they really work hard if they're going to do it. But I don't want to be
see a lot of galleries that don't.
No, they don't. If you're one of their 2 or 3 art stars, they do it for you.
They
That's
do it for
another
you.
downside to galleries that I
Right.
question. What's the name of your business?
I mean, they are paying. The rent is
I'm like a
expensive.
hashtagged fool
Yeah.
right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about, because like I've been with a couple galleries, well, they want contribution, like if they want to be in an art fair, they want the artist to contribute towards the cost of doing an art fair.
That seems
Yeah,
like
you
a
know what
red
I would say
flag.
to them? My contribution is my art.
Yeah,
And I'm curious, well, only, does that mean you don't take the 50% if I'm contributing towards the art fair?
That would be a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You
like,
know?
yeah, I'll give you some money, but you have to take only 30% then on
Right.
I agree with her though. I think actually galleries are generally worth the 50% commission you give them if they're doing at least the basics of what galleries should do. Because their overhead is very, very high. And if it's a good gallery, we'll have a small stable between 12 and 20 artists. You don't want to be in a gallery that has 50 to 100 artists. You want to be one where at least you get some love, but their overhead is incredibly high, and the art fairs are very, very expensive. But if you have a gallery that isn't, you know, giving you a show on a regular basis or taking your work to art fairs, you have to reevaluate that relationship.
But the 50-50 model just has been grandfathered in.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's only there because artists don't push back.
Right.
They're just like, okay, 50-50. In what other business does a 50-50, like in a retail consignment even, like structure
It happens all the
exist?
time in design.
I don't know about design, but in stores, I mean, like in anything, it's like 60-40, 70-30. And in my project space, which by the way is a project space, not a gallery, because we don't represent artists, we do 50-50, and we justify that to ourselves because we work our asses off to get our
And you
artists.
have to put bricks and mortar overhead. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, so does the artist.
I would be willing to reconsider it. You know, just we'll see. We're new.
I
blah,
pay
blah,
all
blah.
my art consultants 50%. That really motivates them. They work more with me than with other artists who are like holding their feet over the fire to get them down to like 20%. I'm like, you know what? You go out and deal with the end user so that I don't have to talk to that husband and wife who can't get along and can't decide on a painting, or I don't have to deal with the purchasing.
Well,
agent
this
at a
brings
hotel.
in a really good point though about what it's all about when it comes to like labor and the distribution of labor in
Yeah.
terms of an artist
Value.
spending time on their work versus the time that they're spending selling their work. So there is something to that. There is something amazing about somebody advocating on your behalf so that you can spend the time working on
But
it.
I think the point here, though, is really, it's up to you. If you want to give someone 50%, that's great. I'm okay with that in certain instances. If you don't, that's good too. You have to understand what is, you know, important to
Well,
you.
the
I would
50%
encourage,
is-
but I would encourage artists as you go forward to push. I mean, I would say like, okay, I'm giving you. I don't think it has to be a given anymore. I would say like, I'm giving you 50%. That's a lot. What are you doing for me? Like, outline
That's the
what.
question.
What
No,
is
the
it?
50%, the 50% though is like, it's like funny money. It's like, I make what I need to make. If I need to make $4,000 from this painting, and I know they can go out and sell it for $8,000, so great.
Works for you.
It works. Okay, but not everybody is in maybe the position that you are, because oftentimes people will come on the table like our consultants or artists, and they'll say, I can sell your work for this much, and you'll get half of it.
That's great. Fine, if they want to sell, I get 4,000 net, they want to sell it for 10,000, I want to know that now I have a painting that's worth $10,000. I'm like, you go for it, girl.
Well,
Get that 6,000
that's another
for
thing that I
yourself.
would actually like to talk about,
Sure.
which is building your market and sustaining. Like, okay, so say you have a piece that sells for 10,000 or whatever. What happens then? I mean, when your work starts to sell for 10,000, because you can be like, great, sell my work for 10,000.
Well, my
but
net is
then-
5,000 then.
Well, but then does everything that, yes, but what if that doesn't, what if you're in a position where that stops happening?
Yeah, I think it's really tricky
And
when
your
you
market.
allow an art consultant or a dealer to mark your work up more than what it's currently selling
I've seen
for.
that happen with young artists.
I've seen it happen
You have
with
to
young artists
really be
who
careful about that.
There was an
I've seen
article
it.
just today that came out about how the bottom is just falling out of the emerging artist market.
Well, what happens is like there's these young artists that come along and they do this really good job of marketing themselves and their work on Instagram and Facebook or whatever, and all of a sudden they're commanding $30,000, and then 5 years passes, and all of a sudden their work is out of style.
Yeah.
People don't care, and their work isn't selling as much anymore. So it goes to auction. Nobody's buying it. That there's a public recording of the fail that happens, and boom, their bubble bursts.
You ever look at artrank.com?
Yes, it's a
No,
really,
what's that?
really intense website.
Oh yes, I have.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's weird.
They list quarterly, it's like buy now, buy early, trending.
It's like the stock
sell
market
now.
for art.
Yeah.
For art.
Yeah, it's actually horrible. I don't
It is.
believe
It's
it.
so gay.
How about for the artists who, I'm probably going to get
Discussion is really.
held for this.
We need more wine.
What if you're not really interested in the money? I mean, I just want to do the work,
Right.
and I wanted to get it out there.
Yeah, sure.
And to me, the money is nice. It's it will allow me to pay for art fairs and so on.
Yeah.
But it's more important that I actually just I produce.
That's why
I'm
I
going to
think-
keep producing.
That's what I'm talking about with goals. If
Yeah.
you don't care about the money,
Yeah,
if
so
it's
the
not
money is
something
not-
that you need to sustain yourself, you have a day job or a trust fund or a husband who's wealthy, whatever, then you can show anywhere you want, including in your own studio. I mean, but we tend to forget that before the early part of the 20th century, there were very, very few dealers, right? Artists always just sold out of their own studio, or they were in salons, in giant
Patrons.
museums, right? And so the concept of art dealers came in the early 20th century, and it kind of took hold in the middle. But you don't need to do that, right? If you just want to get it out, you can have a show in your studio and invite all the people you know.
Okay, secondary though. What if your personality isn't conducive for you to be selling, in your own studio? Because I have a hard time.
But you just said you don't want to sell, so just show your work in your
Right.
studio.
So just show
Or-
it,
or
but I
go
want
to
it
a
out there
collective.
because it's collecting dust in my studio.
Then there's
So how do I get?
there's
Do I just give it
banks,
away?
There's restaurants, there's
Or,
non-profit art
yeah,
centers.
Apply to a submission based.
Yeah, roots and culture,
It's
yeah.
great.
Okay.
Well,
You just
I have
send
a
us
suggestion.
your
But yeah,
materials.
and Victoria, you make a really excellent point though that the next startup fair maybe we'll do as a different panel on, which is what happens to working or to mothers in the art world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's about time.
CVs,
Yeah.
just all of a sudden they
Yeah.
drop off to raise children for a couple of years, and then oh my god, nobody's going to show their work because
Yeah.
there's a freaking hole in their CV.
Yeah.
So we do need to address what
Yeah.
happens when you leave, and then
Yeah.
what happens when you come back, because that is a very valid.
I've got a
situation.
4-month-old, so.
I have a 14-month-old.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is actually.
Wait, we got a question back here. You had your
Yeah,
hand
not a
up for a while.
question, but I just wanted to say something a little bit different maybe. I used to, I've been an artist since when did I graduate? 1997. And I started to, even while I was studying art, I started to teach because I couldn't live off my art. So now in San Francisco, so I also work as a teacher, and I have to start selling art to make up for my dwindling salary as a teacher.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a funny situation because of how the living costs are in San Francisco. And I started to write a business plan for the first time. I did a profit loss forecast, and I found that was an eye opener. And I never thought of it this way. I was really happy. This year I've been making sales on my own through my contacts, and I think like it's great. I'm making sales, and then I'm making this profit loss forecast, and I'm like, wow, this is not enough. I'm still operating at a loss.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, but it also had to do a lot with the taboo around money, of like, okay,
Right.
like what you were
Yeah.
saying, that an artist, a real artist, is really not supposed to be interested in that.
Yeah, that's
and,
true.
Right.
And I felt it was real.
But I think it's really important you take control of your finances, especially that you actually do have a CPA, that you keep your books, or you have someone keep your books for you, and you look on a monthly or quarterly basis is what's really going on.
Yeah.
Because if you have any kind of a business, and let's be clear about being an artist, it's a business.
It's your own.
It's a one-person
Yeah.
business, and you are the CEO, the CFO, the COO. You do everything, right? You need to look at those books all the time and look at where the money's going and where it's coming in, just so you have a understanding of the basic economics of your own business.
Yep.
Then you can make some decisions. Do I need to get a job? Do I need to get a commercial gallery, or can I continue showing in these nonprofit
Do I need
spaces?
to raise my price?
Do I need to raise my prices?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I noticed something that I saw, it was creating data for myself,
Yeah.
and then I saw I need more exposure, because when I have
Right.
exposure, I have sales. And I was
Exactly.
like, wow.
Even when you just, but even when you say, and this goes to your point of
Yeah.
like show in a pizza parlor, when you have a thing, an event to pin your art on, when you're sending out a newsletter or whatever, and you're attaching it to an event, that in itself is going to be like, oh, a thing is happening.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're an artist making work and then you're just, sending out newsletters, like come to my studio, that's one thing, but I do think it's important. If you can't get a gallery show, or you're not being able to, you're not accepted at, your local nonprofit, that I think it really is important to get together with a couple friends and open up your apartment and
Yeah.
just attach, your work to it happening.
One of the most valuable things I ever did it was years ago, but I did a demographic breakdown of everybody who's bought my art so that I could understand who my target audience was. And then I found out where they found out about my work, and it doesn't have to be a large sample. It can be like 20 or 30 people, and it was really interesting to find out who's interested in my work and how they found out about it, and so that informed how I could target them and reach them more.
And I would even say, okay, so this is the PR me coming out. I think it's invaluable to do. I think it would be awesome if I was an artist. What I would do is do an informal market research project where I would invite like 10 to 15 people over to my house for dinner and be like, I'm gonna feed you, and in exchange we're gonna talk about what happens. What do you feel when you receive my emails in your inbox? What do you want to see? What do you think about this last one? And you'll find that, your closest friends, if you're just like, please tell me, what happens, let's dissect this, you're going to get such an amazing, it's so much good feedback.
Get them drunk enough, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's literally what corporations do.
Right.
But it's
survey
Engage
monkey
their
survey.
market.
So here's the problem. Especially as a recent parent, I have my home and my family. I'm fortunate enough that a little bit of money comes in through my nonprofit job, a little bit. But I also have my side hustles. I don't even necessarily, I have art degrees, I do have an artistic practice. I don't have time for it anymore. So for somebody who has a very dedicated studio practice that's balancing job, family, home, and their studio practice, adding in all of this administrative time to look at your spreadsheets, to compile data, to do your PR work. I 100% agree with Ray that being an artist is your own business. But where do you find the time and energy
You need to
to
have a
focus?
source.
Yeah, outsourcing.
Well, I agree, and I mean, this is a very like altruistic, vague thing to say, but and it's increasingly hard in this culture. But artists need more advocates.
Yeah.
And maybe that's another thing.
I own a PR agency
Right.
that specializes in the arts, and we exist for this very reason. We rarely work with artists simply because doing the work of PR is so time consuming that
Artists
it's
can't afford it.
expensive.
Yeah.
And most
Yeah.
artists can't afford it, and we
Yeah.
will generally take on artists oftentimes when there's a specific project to promote and there's funding dollars that are coming in from another entity, so
Sure.
it's not like we're just taking in artists'
Yeah.
dollars,
Yeah.
or we know that the artist is independently wealthy and it's not, I mean, it just can be so much pressure to be like,
Also,
okay,
I
you're
mean-
gonna, but there are people that do it.
Yeah.
There are amazing people out there
Yeah.
that you can find, I know in every city, that are advocates.
And
that
the
work.
thing about artists is that, and one thing I love about artists is they're very creative in their studio practice, and they're incredibly uncreative in terms of financing and PR and marketing. So by the book, they don't even think outside of the box. When you make art, you're minting money. Your artwork is worth money.
That's true.
Barter,
Yeah.
right? I've bartered for legal services,
Yeah.
PR services. I've bartered for, clothing.
Yeah.
I've bartered for studio stuff.
Haircuts.
Artist assistants, haircuts. I have a friend who's bartered for his house, his RV, all of his surfing equipment. Everything he has, he's bartered for. So if you need someone as your advocate to help you do a marketing or PR plan, look to your own artwork as a
Yeah.
source of funding,
Yeah.
right? It's not just a burden that you have to store. It's actually a fungible commodity that you
I got
can
an
use.
Airstream out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have my friend Ted, who I went to art school with. He has bargained for his house and his Airstream and so many things, and I use him as an example. So it's not that you're without resources; you're without cash often, but you have actual fungible goods,
Yeah.
goods that can be traded for cash.
I want to speak about that pizza parlor, keep using it, but restaurants. Because I had it when in the 2001, I had a restaurant that purchased my paintings, and it was a great source of commissions because everybody that, people would come in and see the paintings and they would commission me. But now they're remodeling and they're getting rid of those paintings, and stuff. So, but I then went back to see how many commissions did I get
many
out
did
of
you
that
get?
restaurant. Quite a few, over 20.
So
In a
maybe
15-year
what you
period.
need are more restaurants, not
So
more
what-
galleries, right?
So what I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
is I need to get my paintings in other venues like that where people will see it, because I didn't think about it. I took it for granted. But now that they're remodeling and they're getting rid of the paintings, I'm going to realize I'm losing a source.
I mean, it kind of goes to what she was saying about art consultants. I've really learned kind of late in my career, 25 years into it, that art consultants are an amazing resource for artists that we don't often think about because we're so focused on galleries. But actually, art consultants sell work every day.
Yeah.
And they need lots of art, not just 20 artists. They need hundreds of artists to work with for
They're not
specific
confined
projects.
to like a curatorial
Right,
vision
right,
that they have to
exactly.
bring to
Like
their
in my
gallery.
article,
They're
like-
So how do you
They're
choose
like
a good
Velociraptors.
Google,
Google.
go
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and I mean, you do it like that.
I've seen a couple here today.
Yeah. Well, I work with Heather Marks, who's my business partner, Steve's wife. She puts my work in showrooms, designer showrooms, and
Yeah, so I was
restaurants.
just gonna say.
And I've made several sales through that. And now I'm a huge advocate of art resource and sell it. They're
Yeah, 'cause
actually
You
one
can
of
get
the
especially
names
if you're
from
not
art-
someone that likes to sell, right?
Yeah.
They will sell it for you.
Yeah.
And guess what?
Yeah.
Art consultants
There's
are
a
so
website
creative.
for Art Advisors Association of America. Their
Right.
names are all
Yeah.
there.
Oh, okay.
A lot of them have their websites listed.
And a lot of them have open
But, yeah.
submissions.
Okay, okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
And they're so savvy that they will like come to your project space and look at the work, and then they'll go home and call the artist and try to
Directly.
buy the work through the artist instead of through you.
To save money. They're
So,
quite spoken.
okay.
Well, we're going to have to break up here in
Okay.
a minute, but I just want to see if anybody else had any other questions, because this is very free-flowing. But I wonder, did we answer all your questions? Like, what's the burning question here? Like, what do you want to know about getting
I have
your
a
work
burning
out there and
question.
seeing?
Is there a bubble to art fairs?
I-
Art fairs feel like a bubble right now.
That's a really good question.
A lot of people have been predicting the end of art fairs, and I don't see it happening quite yet, but it could happen.
But some will shake out. It's sort of like when
They
there
do
were
all
like
the time.
57 car dealers in
Oh, yeah.
1915, and now there are like 5.
This one's doing better and better, I think.
It is.
Chicago, yeah,
Art-
totally.
art
But
news
that's
did a
also
really good-
because it's the only one,
Mhm.
in the
No, there's
Midwest, right?
Right.
Well, it also
Two.
provides an art fair experience that's unlike any other, as far as I can tell, and I've been to
And
many.
it's the first one. It's
I
a
ha- and I have-
reiteration of the first.
Exactly, it is the original art fair in the United States.
I am in
Art
love
Chicago.
with this fair,
Yeah.
and I want to know: are you going to expand it for next year?
This one or Art Chicago Expo?
This one.
Yeah.
This one.
Well, our idea has always been, my partner and I have been to franchise this idea, to bring it to other cities, because there's a need for a voice for independent artists, not only in San Francisco and LA and Chicago, but other places. So we're looking at Dallas, we're looking at Seattle, we're looking at Aspen, we're open to ideas. Somebody else said Nashville is the place to go. We need to find a venue where there's a lot of independent artists, there's a lot of money,
Austin.
and there's another art fair that we can kind of satellite onto. Not Austin, maybe
No.
Houston.
Houston.
Houston or Dallas.
Yeah.
That might be the
But
fourth.
Just
we're
gotta
in
follow
three
the money.
places already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, and you're 3 really good ones. And New York.
There's too much going on. I don't think it's our place, actually,
they're not doing New York or Miami for that reason.
so far. Yeah. Miami, certainly, I don't know if we could ever think about doing it, because I don't want to be lost in the wilderness of 20 art fairs.
Mexico
Yeah.
City.
Somebody has mentioned
That's
that.
a great idea.
I know, I've heard that.
That's like
Tijuana, actually. There's
I was
actually a
gonna say,
burgeoning scene in Tijuana.
There is, the
Yeah.
cultural center there
It could be
is-
the next little toe
my God, that
outside
would
of
be
the
so
States.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to Tijuana, I'll cross the border.
You're right there. You're right there.
I mean, I don't know I know Mexico City has collectors.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
don't know.
fantastic.
City's
Lots of
pretty
wealthy
hot.
people.
Oh my, it's the best. I went on my honeymoon there. It's like the best time.
Well, and you
ever.
guys, this is not an idea that's exclusive to me. If you're
Oh,
near Tijuana and you want to start an art fair, I highly recommend you do it. I'll do it as an artist.
I want to be in the studio, that's my
Yeah,
problem.
see, all the artists love the art fair. They don't want to do it. They don't want to create their own.
Yeah, I'd rather pay you and.
All right, any other questions, guys? Any other thoughts?
This was great.
You know what? We're all around all the time. Danielle's around the whole weekend. I'm
I'm in
around.
5'10".
He's in
Okay.
5'10". If you have any questions and you have anything you want to talk about, questions.
I have one more question.
Okay, one more question.
Maybe I missed the important part
Okay.
that you mentioned. As an artist, I don't have a business sense and I don't know how to approach the gallery that I want to represent my work.
So we
So
did
what's
talk
the
about that
strategy?
actually, and the strategy is really do your homework.
Do you have
How
a
to do
gallery
my-
in mind? Do you have a specific gallery in mind? That you
No,
want to
no,
show
but
your-
I know if I'm looking for some galleries, I have to know how the gallery style somehow fits. My
Right.
work has to be fit
Right,
to that gallery.
exactly.
Mhm.
That's for sure I know,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to approach.
Well,
Like,
once
if
I
you
think I would like to take this question. Once you
Back
Oh, you.
off.
Oh, yeah.
once you need to start figuring out what gallery it is that you want to show your work, and then you need to go there and
Patronize them. Get to know.
go to the shows.
One more?
The shows happen every month. You know, there's a lot of opportunities to engage. And I would say go to the opening and talk to the artist, not just the gallerist, talk to the artist. And just, I mean, there's something to be said for the organic process of meeting people and having good conversations with them and not necessarily being like, hi, I'm an artist, here's my work, but just have a nice conversation with them about their work and about what they're doing, and then be like, you know, after a couple of times, yeah, I'm an artist. You haven't seen my amazing, you know, toilet plunger work.
Oh, no,
That's
Come
what
to the
she
studio.
did.
Plunger
That's
idea.
amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think it's not, there's no, I mean, I think the takeaway here with this is that there is no is the expression silver bullet.
No silver bullet.
There's no one little trick or thing. It's a thing. It's an organic process that happens over time, and it's intuitive. And it's not about business so much as it is about relationship building.
Art
and
runs on a
people.
social economy. And so that's, once you understand that the whole art business runs on a social economy, then it becomes, your path becomes more clear about what you need to do. You just go to you look at the art you like to look at, you go to the galleries where you enjoy the type of art, you talk to the people about the type of art you're looking at, and it's very easy in so many ways once you realize that. It's just like, just go where you like the art and talk about the art and meet the artist and meet the other people who like the artist, and don't be calculated about it. Just do it.
It's relationships. And let me just say one other thing too.
Be calculated, but don't be calculated.
One thing I want to say really quickly too, it's about relationships, it's also about community, and I think that's the one thing that artists always forget, is that we're part of a very large community, right? You have an immediate community and a very larger community, and so don't forget to tap into that, because we are all here to help each other, right? You may know an artist who's in a gallery you want to get into, so talk to them and say, how do I get them to come to my studio? Can you put in a good word for me? Do you think my work fits? So look at your immediate...
what can you do for them? I'm so
exactly,
sick of the, I'll scratch your back, you stab mine.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I help a lot of artists.
I think
and
it
it's like,
goes
I'm
without
so
saying.
over it.
It goes without saying that if somebody does you a solid, you help them out. I help out everyone. If somebody wants a letter of recommendation, I'm there to write it. If somebody wants me to do a studio visit, I'm there to go. Right? But if I want something from people, I have no compunction asking them, because I give as much as I ask of other people. So be part of that economy, right? And part of that community, and tap into it when you need to. So, don't think you're alone, in other words, and use your network that you have to help you. So that's my
I have a friend who's an artist who introduced me to a gallery, and I'm going to be showing there. So
Every
it is
other
relationships.
business understands the favor bank. And
All right.
Because before I thought, if you don't know anybody in that gallery, you just simply go there and they don't really.
Well, you get to know people,
care
right?
about
You
you.
go to
Otherwise-
their openings, you
Yeah.
patronize them, you get to know their artists. You have to build those relationships. It doesn't really work any other way.
It might take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's
Just do
easier
it.
if you have like a little bit of stage fright. Like if you go to a gallery or you really want to meet the the director or the artist who are showing there, to go with somebody, a co-artist, and then sometimes like if you are speaking for she will, let's say your friend is an artist, because, oh, your work, I mean, she's really interested in your work, and I think you could have a dialogue. So sometimes it's easier. Like I've done that, where I go to a gallery and like meet a curator, artist. It's nice to go in a pack.
Yeah.
Really strategic. Usually there will be the
each other
speaker.
out.
Yeah,
I like
the
that.
speaker. Really, the ones, and usually we will assign a speaker, the one who can really and have
Bring your
unabashed.
outgoing friends.
Yeah.
And totally. Why
It's
not?
really, it takes the stress from
And then
use.
half of that.
All right, guys, we are way over time. Thank you for being here. Thank you.